This is a story about a mountain country and about the people who live in a part of it. There are many mountainous regions like this one, where people have worked out a pattern of living on small farms and in small mountain villages. We can find people living in mountainous regions in North and South America, in Europe and Africa, and in Asia and Australia. The particular mountain setting of our story is in Western Europe, in Switzerland. Here in Switzerland, the famous Alps mountains cover much of the area of the country. Almost half of the Swiss people live in the mountains. Let's look more closely at this mountain village, which is about 5,000 feet above sea level. In this small village, most of the women and girls wear traditional clothes, which we would not find in the larger Swiss cities. But we do find things which we would see in any small town. Here is the village church with its clock tower, and the village school. The schoolhouse sign is in French, the language of this part of Switzerland. In the stores and shops, the villagers buy goods made in the manufacturing cities of Switzerland and other countries. And so the village is the center of activity for the people who live nearby. To visit one of the families of this mountain region, let's go out to the edge of the village to a Swiss farmhouse. This is the home of the Villars family. It's an old house nestled close to the mountainside, and it has a steep roof to shed the heavy winter snow. The northern end of the house, toward the mountain, is built of stone to make it snug and warm during the cold winter. The southern end of the house, facing the sun, is built of wood. Wood for building houses and wood for fuel can be cut in the forests of the nearby mountains. Many generations of the Villars family have lived in this house and have tilled a small patch of ground nearby. On this fine summer day, Annette and her mother weed the vegetable garden. They work hard to get the most out of their garden in the summer, because the growing season is short in this cool mountain region. Even in summer, the snow does not melt on the high peaks. Annette and Mother raise many vegetables, including beans and potatoes. Beyond the garden is the mountain slope that rises behind their house. Here are forests and grassy mountain pastures. On the green meadows, if we look closely, we can see some men at work. They are farmers cutting hay. Machinery cannot be used easily in the small sloping fields, so the work is done by hand. Much hay and other feed crops must be grown in the summer to feed the cattle during the long winter. Rocky slopes higher up in the mountain are used for pasturing goats. This is Annette's brother, Paul, who tends this flock during the summer. Goats are well suited to mountain regions because they can graze in places that are too steep and rocky for growing crops. The goats belong to Paul's family and to their neighbors. The Swiss raise many goats and use the milk to drink and to make cheese. Perhaps you are beginning to see that the mountains affect almost everything the Swiss people do, how they live and how they work. On some of the highest slopes, we'll find the cattle belonging to Paul's father and his neighbors. Every summer, Mr. Villars spends his time here, high above the village, taking care of the cows and making cheese from their milk. The high mountain meadows where the cattle graze are called Alps. These mountain meadows may be as high as 9,000 feet. Mr. Villars spends much of his time in this little hut where he makes cheese. Notice that the hut is made almost entirely of stones. Thick stone walls keep the cheese house cool. Inside the little house, Father heats the milk in a big kettle, the first step in making cheese. When the milk reaches the right temperature, he will add a fine white powder to make it curdle or form lumps. A little later, he gathers the lumps, or curds, in a bag. The bag is made of a coarse cloth that lets the liquid, or whey, drip out. Perhaps you can see now why this kind of cloth is called cheesecloth. After the curds are pressed into the wooden mold, the lid is weighted down. When all the whey has been pressed out, the cheese will be firm. The next morning, Father opens the mold and lifts out the cheese. And there it is, a Swiss cheese. The cheese of Switzerland is known all over the world for its flavor. But the new cheese is not ready to eat yet. It must be put for several months in the curing house. Here it will age or cure, and then be carried with the rest of the cheeses down to the village. And so Mr. Villars will be busy making and storing cheese through the summer until autumn. In the autumn, Mother and Annette are drying beans, part of the food they are storing for winter. During the summer, they have dried vegetables, picked apples, and dug potatoes from the garden. On this fine September day, they are watching for Father and Paul. This is the day the cattle are to be driven down the mountain. When the cattle are brought down from the high pastures, it means that summer is over. There are Father and Paul now. The cows are fat and sleek after spending all summer in the rich green mountain meadows. During the coming winter, they will be fed on the hay we saw being cut on the mountain slopes. Now, with the cows back at the farmhouse, Mother and Annette use some of the fresh milk to make butter. Using the churn is a household job that Annette wants to learn. Paul, too, has chores to do. He's digging out the last of the potatoes before the freezing weather comes. Potatoes are part of the winter food supply. And of course, Father has plenty to do, cutting a good supply of firewood for the winter. People who live in mountain regions usually gather a good supply of food and fuel because they are often isolated by heavy snows. Father reminds Paul that it is now late autumn. It will not be long before the cold winds come down from the mountain peaks, bringing the snow that will fill the mountain passes and roads. A few weeks later, the first snowfall whitens the slopes and valleys. Winter has come. The village, too, lies under a beautiful covering of freshly fallen snow. In the village, and in the house of the Villars family, the daily activities are somewhat different now than they were in the summertime. Each morning, Paul and Annette walk to school in the village. Like Paul and Annette, the children of the village spend most of their day doing their lessons in this schoolhouse. But not all their time is spent here. After school, they have fun sledding and skiing. Swiss boys often become excellent skiers. Let's watch Paul coming down the slope. There, that was well done. Skiing is a favorite sport in Switzerland, and visitors from many countries come to enjoy it. After a day of school and sports, we'll find Annette and Paul spending the evening in their warm, snug house. Their home, as are most Swiss homes, is lighted by electricity. While Mother spins, the children finish their schoolwork and Father reads the latest paper. Like most fathers, he sometimes gives a little advice, too. The winter evenings are long, but Mother keeps busy at her spinning wheel, her skillful fingers making yarn. Later, she will knit the yarn into an article of clothing. Perhaps she is planning to make a cap for Annette, or a pair of warm stockings or mittens. And so the family spends their evening together, just as we do in our own homes. But the kind of life that these Swiss people live has its own kind of daily and yearly pattern. It is a pattern that is closely related to the great rugged mountains where they live.